Welcome back to Morning Joe. 40 past the hour. We are joined by retiring Democratic Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana. He serves on the Senate Banking Committee, and he joins us here in our studio. Good to have you in this morning. Nice to see you again.
Great to be with you in person, Mika.
Should we start with the overall question that we're asking people, both parties this morning? How's the president doing? How's the White House handling this bill?
Well, it's a rough patch for the president, largely because of reasons that aren't his fault. You know, I honestly think a lot of the criticism is a bit overdrawn. He hadn't had a "you're doing a great job" Brownie moment, for example, nothing like that. And no matter what he does, that video of the oil continuing to come out is going to be there for a while, although it seems as if they may have made some progress the last few days. So this is a tough spot, but it's primarily because of the economy, the budget deficit, some larger macro issues that we still need to address as a country.
Well, let's talk about the economy. Friday's numbers came out. Disappointing. What's it mean?
Well, most of the jobs, Joe, were census jobs. So unless we're going to go to annual census instead of once every 10 years, we got to try
it every year.
We got to try some. I wouldn't be surprised if some member of Congress came up with that proposal, but obviously that's not going to get the job done. We were in for a substandard recovery no matter what, given the nature of the crisis that we were in, the amount of the debt we got to work our way through, and we're beginning to see that now. It's just going to be a longer slog, and if you're looking to November, it's unlikely you're going to see robust numbers between now and then, which means that this probably going to go away soon.
What does the Senate do? What does the House do? What does the White House do to turn things around? Because we've tried spending, and the economy's not recovering from having, trillions of dollars pumped into the economy from the federal government. What's the next step? Is it more money?
There's no quick or easy fix to this, Joe. You got to look longer term. Green energy, renewable energy, I think that's something that would not only help us from a national security standpoint, but from a job creation standpoint. It would help our trade imbalance. Some of the investing in innovation, things that will actually create value and good, sustainable jobs in the long term. But what in essence happened was the president came in, was faced with a crisis, some things that were done that kept it from being worse than it otherwise would have been, but there was no kind of magic wand, snap your fingers, and we're going to have this behind us moment. This is going to take some time. That's the unfortunate truth.
A vision, though, right? More than
a unifying theme, Mika, absolutely. It involves fiscal discipline. It involves the money that you do invest in things that will actually create quality, long-term economic opportunity rather than just short-term temporary stimulus, those kinds of things. And, he's been willing to, Arnie Duncan, who was just on, they've been willing to talk truth to the American people about education reform. Before this disaster in the Gulf, he was beginning to talk about, look, we need nuclear power. We need to have some other domestic sources. So he was beginning that conversation with the debt panel that's coming up in November and December. Let's hope they can get their act together. So you are beginning to see a more mature dialogue with the American people about long-term steps that will put us on a better economic path.
Well, let me ask you about this, because we've talked about the deficit time and time again over the past couple of years, actually going back several years.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, we had Arnie Duncan on before, talking about it's going to need $25 billion of stimulus money to keep teachers in classrooms. Is that something that you think Congress will pass?
It's probably a little less than 50-50 right now, Joe, to be honest, because you've got that on the one hand, which David Broder wrote on Sunday, is the good thing, the right thing to do. You got to juxtapose that to the growing deficit problem. And we're looking at Europe and what's happening there. So my answer to that would be yes, let's keep the teachers in the classroom. We don't want to shortchange our kids in education. But if we're going to make that investment, let's tie it to meaningful reform. So you provide the resources, but you get the long-term improvements hand in hand.
So the White House says we will give you the money to keep the teachers in the classrooms, but you're going to have to enact the type of reforms that Secretary Duncan support, that Barack Obama support, that a lot of people, even in the Republican Party, support.
Joe, that's exactly right. You'd get better education in the long run. You might have a rare bipartisan moment, not just throwing money at the problem, but saying, look, let's have higher academic standards and accountability for results.
And that is, Mika, the investment that we talk about, where, yes, we spend the money, we take the hit, but the payoff from it.
In fairness, the White House has stood by those reforms. They've made states, including Tennessee, including New York,
what about New York?
Live up to those standards.
Arnie Duncan, we had him on the show, and we asked Arnie, and this is what I was referring to before, what about the New York legislature that's standing in the way? And he basically said, they're not going to get the money. They're not going to get the
caps on the charter
top money. And so they listened, Willie, and man, they lifted those caps, didn't they?
Up to 400,
I think, all because of White House pressure.
They put heat on them. I wanted to ask you, Senator Bayh, we introduced you as the resigning senator, Evan Bayh.
Actually, retiring. Yeah,
retiring
for that.
Retiring, I think it was. Retiring.
You don't resemble that remark.
Thank you, Harold. And neither do you. Neither does Joe.
You've got a lot of good years ahead of you, Senator. But you, when you announced your retirement, you alluded to a frustration with the way that Washington works. What specifically did you mean by that? What frustrates you in Washington?
Oh, Willie, how long a segment do we have here?
We tend to go long on this show.
Well, look, there's just way too much partisanship, way too much ideological rigidity rather than focusing on practical results. And many of the bills that we have to vote on are very frustrating because they include some good things, but then a lot of bad things. So you're forced to vote up or down when you'd rather say, now, wait a minute, let's have a longer conversation and get to a better result.
So how do we break through that? How do you change that?
By electing people who are more practical rather than so partisan, by electing people who want to make progress rather than just having to score ideological talking points. Basically, our democracy is in our own hands, Willie. We need to insist on people who behave better if we want better results.
Hey, let me ask you this question.
Can I say one final thing, Joe? Sure. Really, I'm a former governor at heart. 8 years as an executive where I was actually making decisions. Right. So that's just kind of part of my DNA, too.
Yeah. I just had somebody email me about something I said earlier about Frank Rich and other Democrats that have been critical of the president on the way he's handled the crisis. Also, I talked about thought leaders like Tom Brokaw, not a Democrat, Tom's a centrist, but just talking about a lot of people who are not ideological right-wingers have been concerned about the president's leadership style over the past month or so. Some at the White House don't like the fact that we have people on the show. Even Jeffrey Sachs, who's been an Obama supporter for a very long time, that's been critical of the president's leadership. Is it fair to question the president's leadership right now? How he's handling not only the economy, but the BP spill?
Well, it's always...
And why are some Democrats, again, not talking about Tom Brokaw, but why are some Democrats concerned right now?
It's always fair to analyze and to criticize, Joe. We're in a democracy. That's what it's all about. But I do think some of that is a little overblown and a little unfair. The base of your party always expects you to agree with them 100% of the time.
Right.
The right wing is the same way. We saw that with Bob Bennett in Utah. The two bases are just very polarized right now, and any deviation from party orthodoxy is treated as an act of betrayal. The president has to govern in a practical way. And that means sometimes bringing people together and getting away from just the rigid ideological talking points and instead saying, what can we get done?
And you think,
how can we make progress?
The president's done that? I mean, you're leaving Washington.
I think he's trying, Joe, and I think he's done some good things. Education is an example.
Right.
We talked about his steps on energy. You know me, I personally wish we'd taken a firmer line on spending and the deficit, but then the base of our party is out there just in a different place. So I can tell you what the president's advisors tell him when he says, look, I think we ought to draw the line here or here, and they say, well, now wait a minute, Mr. President, you need the Speaker's support on this, this, and this. You need the leader in the Senate support on this, this, and this. Do you really want to pick that fight now? So he constantly has to deal with reality. And when you are governing, that's what separates you from writing an op-ed piece or being on an ed board or being a political scientist. You have to deliver results. Sometimes that means making principled compromises.
Tough choices.
You know, the wings of two parties aren't interested in principled compromises.
Right.
They want it all. But in the real world, and I suspect most of your viewers, they want progress. That's what he's for.
They do. They do. You know, we get so many nights. I just want to say, this was downtown New York yesterday. Had so many people coming up, and it was really nice. I watch the show every day. They always say the same thing. I'm a Democrat and blah, 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 but I, like you all right. And Mika and Willie are really, really great. But it really is. It's nice. And they say the same thing that you just said. We want progress. We don't trust the ideologues. And I think that's where most of America is. I think these ideologues, these extremists, are getting more and more marginalized every week.